Hey, all, welcome back to Real Management Talk with LJ and Jocelyn. And we started this as a lark. Really, that's the truth. That is the true story. We literally started this as a lark. We thought, hey, we keep having these conversations. We should let everybody in the world in on our conversations, whether they wanted to hear them or not, right?
Yeah. It's our fishbowl. This is our fishbowl invitation. So thank you so much for joining us for this fishbowl conversation.
I love it.
Please feel free to leave your comments and post your questions on whatever format you're listening to us on. Please feel free to post comments and leave questions. But yeah, welcome to the fishbowl.
Yes. And we're very excited to have you here and have you hear our discussion today. So we've got a really good one today, I think, right? Yeah. Okay. So we were discussing. Y'all ready out there? Because here's what we're discussing. Business as usual is dead. It's dead, guys. Hate to say it, but it's the truth. It's dead. It ain't going back.
Flatline. And stop talking about recovery, guys. This is not one of those usual recessions, right? You go through a normal recession, you kind of figure out, what's not working and sort of what we can do better the next time. This is not that situation. We're all talking about possibly shutting down things again. No, we're not even close to normalcy. So, let's not fool ourselves with these recovery talks.
Right. Well, exactly. Right. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm just going to say it. That train has left the station. It's gone. Yep, exactly. And if you're listening on radio, you really miss seeing LJ running.
Train's moving.
Train is moving. I mean, it's, and so that has changed a lot of things, right? Especially, for every type of business, it's really changed a lot of things, and we could have hour-long discussions on that, but especially the nonprofit world. So what's the impact it's had on the nonprofit world?
So it's everything from forcing you to think about e-commerce and actually move or act on some sort of e-commerce plan as soon as possible, and everything from thinking about how you're positioning your fundraising plan, right? If you're looking at your fundraising strategies, specifically thinking about grant writing, you really have to think about how you are contributing to the ecosystem that which you serve or that which you reside within, right? Both. You've got to be thinking about, are you employing people in the community that which you serve? And are you an employer of good repute? That's the other part of it. So payroll withholdings, Jocelyn and I were just talking about how important it is for, from the grantor's perspective, from the philanthropic community's perspective, how important it is for you to be very serious about the work that you're doing by having staff. If you're a nonprofit, especially if you're one that's been around for, more than 3 years and you don't have a paid staff member, that's a red flag. That's a huge red flag for the philanthropic community, because what it's really signaling is that you could be here today and gone tomorrow. If there's another sort of nonprofit that's in your space that does similar work, if they step up and they seek a grant opportunity from that exact same grantor to do the work that you're doing, plus a little bit more, plus they have staff, they're going to get it over you, and they're going to get it every time. Because when the grant reviewer, and Jocelyn and I, again, come from the perspectives of not only being grant writing professionals, but also being grant reviewers. We review grants for these funders and the philanthropic community that, you know, annually is awarding $30 to $60 million in grants, right? We
Right.
come from that perspective. So we know on those advisory committees and those grant review boards, that's the question, that's the conversation that we have as grant reviewers. You know, how anchored is this nonprofit organization in the community that they serve? You know, is it just about, you know, throwing them money to support general operating costs to, you know, get from point A to point B with volunteers, you know, volunteer staff and a volunteer board? Or is it about having staff that are able to really do the work and actually supporting the staff in doing that work?
Right. Well, and you're exactly right. I mean, that's the thing. There's certain things that as a business you've got to be doing, but especially in the nonprofit world, and as we've talked about before, when your nonprofit is a corporation straight off the bat with a board of directors and like that, it's expected to be being operated as a business. Now, just like with any startup, in that first year, you know, people are going to give you some leeway and like that. You're getting your feet wet. Maybe you started your nonprofit and you've never run a business before. And even, you know, I hate to say this, but your boards and directors members are friends and family who want to see you succeed, but they have never run a business before either. And so there's a lot of learning. It doesn't mean that you can't. It's just like any person who starts any business the first time. I mean, there's a lot of learning that goes into it. But there are key indicators that, you know, if you're a few years down the road, unless you're just doing this part-time, and I mean really part-time, if you're saying you're running it around the time and these programs and stuff, you should be growing to be adding staff, to be adding systems, to be adding processes. And in today's world, that also means having things like payroll, for instance, because, you know, payroll gets a lot of businesses in trouble. And it gets businesses in trouble without us going into like every which way you can get into trouble on payroll. And I think I've seen just about all of them. But the biggest part that people get in trouble for, and it's for-profits and nonprofits alike, is not paying employee taxes for W-2 employees. And and in some states and like that, you know, unemployment taxes, and in some states, training taxes that are associated that you as the employer have to pay, and also submit the employees half. And without a professional payroll system, you know, you can't produce those reports, but you also sometimes need those reports, especially if we're talking a reimbursement type grant, right? Or a reimbursement contract. Maybe you can also have contracts that are reimbursement. And you need to submit proof of payroll. The P&L that shows you paid somebody, it's not good enough. That's not the proof of it. And yeah, I mean, so let's talk about systems and data a little bit here.
Yeah.
How important is that?
You're right, 100%. I had the largest headache, like not even a week ago, because one of the things that I was, you know, working on for a client was responding to TWC, you know, the Texas Workforce Commission. And that's, you think about payroll withholding, right? They're the ones who are asking you for that. They're asking you really quarterly a lot of times for that information so that they are, you know, able to report accurately on Texans that are employed and their benefits or lack thereof, you know what I mean? And so it's like really, it's unfortunate when you have these organizations that really don't understand, like you said, it's like you established a nonprofit, you know, you're not there, of course, to make money. You're there to really fulfill some sort of charitable goal, mission, vision, which is awesome because you're a 501c3 and that's what you're organized to do. But you are also a business, and part of you being a business means that you are an employer. And so things like data matters. You have to be collecting. These grants will not allow you to submit unless you're collecting basic demographic data, for example. You'd be surprised how many people try to submit grants and don't even know who sits on their board. They don't have a clue how these people identify. They don't know if they're, Black, if they're Asian, if they're, you don't need to know their exact age. Hopefully you are collecting their birth dates so you have an idea. But if you don't collect their birth date and you just ask them to, sort of circle which age range they fall within, give them some categories. You need to be collecting upon entry when they, get appointed to the board. You need to be collecting data at that point. But obviously, just like with performance evaluations, you've got to be collecting this demographic data on your board members. Maybe they move residences, maybe they leave a job, maybe, at first when you put them on the board, you wanted them on the board because they were a key decision maker at HEB, right? But then, maybe a year after they started their service on the board, they left HEB and now they're at Valero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are they a key decision maker at Valero? You need to know that because, maybe you want to be a part of the charity. What is it? They call it the Tees, the charity for Tees, or the Tee charity where they do a golfing tournament and they select a certain number of charities. Birdies for charity.
It's the Birdies for charity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Right? But if you don't know who sits on your board and you don't know, where they are, it's really, so you've got to be thinking forward about the data that you're collecting. You want to obviously be cognizant of privacy issues and privacy rights. You want to make sure also that you're very emotionally intelligent in how you're asking the questions that you'll need to ask to gather the type of information that you're seeking. Remember that there is a difference between data and information, and we do want you to start. Staff and leadership within 501c3s forget that the most important place for you to start is with information. What are the questions that you need to ask? What is the information that you need? From there is how you decide what sorts of data fields and data categories you'll need to set up to get that information. If you can't get it just directly from a question, right? But again, being very cognizant of how you're surveying to get the information, who's designing the question, who's designing the survey. You need to have people on staff that really have a knack for data. Not only people that know how to mine for it, but also people who know how to analyze it. Because once you have that analysis piece down, I think you're cognizant of the fact that there are things like the IRB boards, where if there's certain types of information that you're trying to get from participants, for people that you serve, if it's human subjects that you're surveying or that you're researching, there's got to be IRB standards in place. There's certain things that you have to be cognizant of when you're gathering data, because data is literally someone's livelihood. Right. I think Gary Vee was saying a couple of days ago that this is where we are now. This is reality. This is the world now. Mm-hmm. This is the first world, and then our real life, when we're not on this, is secondary. He said this is primary, and then the rest of this, when I go feed my husband and feed myself, are secondary now. Can you imagine someone saying that is prolific?
Well, it is. Prolific. I'm not totally sure I agree with his assessment on that, but
right.
But this is definitely the second world, if it's not the first world.
If it's not the first, it's definitely the second.
Right. Well, and it gets us back to our whole topic of business as usual is dead, because it is. This is the thing. 6 months into this thing, almost 9, guess when we start March. So basically, we're close. We're 6 months into this thing, and the truth is, we're not going back. Business isn't going back. We've all had to adapt. We're still adapting. There was we know from an economic standpoint that there's the first wave that hits in economics whenever there's any type of disaster, any type of upheaval, any type of, and I mean, it can be on a personal level or, in this particular case, we're talking, well, I think the last time we sort of had a global event like this was in 1918 with the Spanish flu. And even then, when you really look at kind of what happened, this one's totally unprecedented because like the whole world shut down all at the same time, right? But today I was taking a walk in the new place where we're living here, and I'm walking in a place where they really built up. They built up like this main street, and at one end is huge movie theater that I found out real recently was a Regal theater, and it was sort of open until Regal announced the other day that and there were these restaurants and all these shops and everything. And just in the months that we've been here, like today I noted that there's a couple more that are empty. And I'd say that there's at least 50% of that commercial space right now that's available. And, the truth is that we're about to hit the second economic wave because there always is a second one. And this one, typically speaking, is worse. And I don't know, everybody can sit back and blame all kinds of different sides for all of this every which way around. You know what? We're humans. Here's the thing I always say. We're humans all the way around the world. And people made decisions that unfortunately, probably in some cases affected all of us globally in a way that it shouldn't have, but it did. And, but we made the best decisions, and we've tried to make the best decisions. And, I think that the reality is one thing is business dead, and two, and we're not going back. And we have to do things in a different way, but I had a discussion with somebody earlier this week about grant funding, like on Monday with a group of people. And because they really wanted to know. And I said to them, look, if you're starting out right now, every once in a while, depending what category you're in, you can kind of get some seed money or whatever. There is a couple of areas that are hot for funding, okay? But the vast majority of people, you need to be in business at least 3 years. And I said, and we don't even know what the numbers are during COVID or even post-COVID. And we're not even to post-COVID. So during COVID, we know what funding was pre-COVID right now. And funding pre-COVID was like, on average, 1 out of every 10 grant applications got funded. And it was starting to get tighter. Why was it getting tighter? Because foundations, private donors, both public and private foundations, government funders, individual donors, major donors, you name it, people who are leaving you money in their wills, want to see that you're going to be here and you're operating like a business. And they don't want to see that the money is being misspent, that they're being told one thing, but it's being diverted to someplace else. And the only way to do that is to look directly at the financials and things that are being, filed. But then when we get to funding, it is, you need to know just as much about your board and your staff's demographics and things like that, and all your volunteers as you do about all your program participants. And you have to have a system to keep that data.
A spreadsheet is not a database, folks.
Well, it's not a database, but it's at least, if you're not doing anything right now, though, an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, or I don't know, there's that other system out there, or, Corel's still around, whatever. A spreadsheet is a nice place to start if you don't have a database yet. While you're researching database, at least get it into one spot. But you really do need, and on that, I think another area that a lot of, well, businesses in general miss, but nonprofits really miss, unless they're in one of the three, what you would call healthcare or mental health, substance abuse treatment, where they're really, really, really regulated, just like that sector is in the private sector. Most nonprofits miss the fact of cybersecurity and the fact of how important it is and why you have to have a database. And by the way, you need at least 3 backups. And that database is accessible by more than one person in your organization. And that more than one person is an actual admin in case something happens. There's an idea. How many things have we had to figure out how to rebuild, try to figure out people's, I mean, especially if somebody's been fired.
Come on now.
Or they didn't get fired, but they left in a huff. I mean, you know, how much of that stuff have we had to figure out? And you've got all of this stuff going. But, you know, people, I'm just going to say this. I know LJ's going to go with this one, I'm sure. Pay for the systems that are in the cloud. Get your stuff in the cloud.
Just saying.
You're so worried about data breaches. You can build a server system on site, but even if you have one on site, you need to be backing up to the cloud.
Yep.
And you need to hire the cybersecurity professionals. And I know in the city that you're in, I'm still learning around here, but I know that in San Antonio, we got some really good cybersecurity companies that can come help you set it up and make sure that you're in compliance. Because what nonprofits also, they don't pay attention to the changes in laws and stuff. Well, I don't have to because I'm a nonprofit. There, I said it out loud.
Right.
That's the attitude half the time.
It is. And I mean, like you said, it's you need to just surround yourself. And I made a post about this on LinkedIn, I think. You need to surround yourself with people who don't think like you, who don't speak your language. And when I say language, I'm not just saying, oh, habla español. No, okay. I'm saying literally the knowledge domain that you function most of the time in. You know, Jocelyn and I have very specific skill sets. We can go across multiple industries, but we have very specific skill sets. You listening probably also have a very specific skill set. Get with people who are not like you, who do not speak your language, right? That is the easiest way to really kind of figure out what it is that your organization is lacking, how to prioritize what really matters versus what's just like, okay, it's good to know, good to have that level of insurance, but I don't necessarily need it tomorrow. You know, You got to have people that talk the talk, that understand. What does that mean? When we look at your budgets, and this is the other thing I was going to tell you, Jocelyn, in answering your question, business as usual is dead. Back in the day, you used to get away with writing a quick letter of interest. And you would attach your mission and vision and your little program materials and a little profit and loss statement. Guess what, folks? That ain't happening no more. Everything that you submit, whether it be for a grant or a proposal itself, you're responding to, a request for proposal, you're responding to a request for application, a request for quotation, whatever it is, okay? Invitation to bid, whatever it is that you're responding to, you have to be sophisticated in your response. What does that mean? Like we said earlier, you need to be thinking about, is my organization an employer of good repute? How do I define good repute, good reputation? That means not only do I have good record management, I've got payroll withholding information. If you need evidence of payroll withholding, I've got that. if you need evidence of my filings, my quarterly filings to the TWC, Texas Workforce Commission, or whatever workforce board you might have in your state, I have that. If you need performance evaluations for my employees to show that when they got hired, you know, we had a quick onboarding and, you know, they got their handbooks and their standard operating procedures on this date. And then we had a performance evaluation, the first one in 30 days, and then we did the 60-day, and then we did the 90, and then we just took it to annual. Okay, you have, if you're gonna be an employer of good repute, you've gotta have all that documentation. Just that is exhausting, okay? We haven't even gotten into the rest of what you need for your grant application. That's just one small but very important component of that grant application. Then you gotta think about, how are you managing communications within the organization? Your grantors, the philanthropic community, wants to know, how does your team communicate the work that they're doing, the status of the work? And like Jocelyn was asking before, the data, you know, what type of data are they collecting and how are they storing that data?
Yeah.
You know, if you've got, if you put it on the cloud, then we're assuming that you've got it, you know, a backup is located in multiple locations. So, you know, if something happens, for example, if you're operating principally out of Lake Charles, Louisiana, we know that they are prone to having natural disasters. You know, you might have a server that has some of your information backed up there. Okay, but if something happens, you might have another server that's located in Plano, Texas, where you don't have as many natural disasters, but you still do. And then you might have another one that's backed up out there with Jocelyn in Williamsburg, Virginia. You know, you just have to be thinking about that.
Right. Well, there's natural disasters everywhere.
Whew, Lord. I feel like I'm in Kansas.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you think about, I mean, it was a terrible tragedy, but if you think about Paradise, California, a couple of years ago, when, you know, the fires took off so bad and literally just 100% wiped out the entire city. And if those businesses didn't have backups, they were just done. So the thing is that you always need to have a backup that is off-site. And by off-site, we mean not even in your same city. Because I can tell you that a little over 22 years ago, something like that, I worked on a project in a city that went completely underwater when the Licking River rose in about 4 hours. And it was the county seat. And the courthouse was 3 stories high with the steeple, and you saw about this much of the steeple. The entire river road, the entire city went under, and they had backup. The county clerk had backup. Unfortunately, the backup was stored at her house. So they lost every record. You're talking birth certificates, you're talking all kinds of stuff. So the rule of thumb really is you're on site, and you might even have a backup on site because, you know, that's the first place you want to start, right? But then you have a second backup, and it could be off site someplace in town. It could even be with a company that's in town. So let's take like the San Antonio area. You might be backing up to Rackspace's servers somehow if they offer backup. I don't know if they do. They offer a server space and stuff, but you know. But then the truth is that you want backup someplace else in the world that is not geographically located with you. Why? As many business owners and nonprofits have found, unfortunately, over the, you know, last 100 years or better, but really, you know, let's just cover the last 100 years, that if they've got the right backups, they're not down very long and they can get back up and to running. Even if their team is personally impacted. They're able to get up and running a lot faster. But companies that don't, they're just done. And it doesn't matter whether you're a for-profit or you're a nonprofit. You really are, because you just kind of lost. I mean, you may still be functioning for a while because you technically have money in the bank and like that, but a lot of like what you were able to produce and like that. So that's why it's so important. And, I think the biggest part of this discussion is going into whatever this new era is. But these types of calls are definitely part of it. So I'll agree with Gary Vee on that. I'm not quite sure I agree that it's number one and family life outside of this is number two, but
I still need to eat. That's all I got to say.
On that, but I agree with his premise from the other side. But even when we have that, y'all need to start spending some money. I'm just going to say it.
Can we just clarify? Stop asking for money that you have no record of spending. That's the problem too. You see people all the time. They've got budgets that are not even $40,000 a year, but they're submitting grants for $100,000, $200,000. On the offhand chance that happens, that you get the support in that amount, just understand that your budget needs to reflect your priorities. And that's what I think a lot of businesses in general lose track of. Your budgets tell the story better than your programs, better than your testimonial. If I'm looking at your budget and you're supposed to be, a healthcare organization that's supposed to be offering, X number of screenings every month to this area of town, and I look at the budget and there's no budget, there's no monies allocated in your expenses for preparing for the screenings, then obviously there's a disconnect here, because how are you going to deliver that service if you don't have there's no preparation for it, there's no spending for that service. So that's what a lot of businesses kind of don't get considered for these grants just off of a quick review of your budget, because your budget is not communicating the need that you say you have.
Exactly. And just like anything else, people aren't going to keep contributing. Foundations aren't going to keep contributing. Governments aren't going to, individuals are going to keep contributing. If you're not doing what you say, and you're not giving thought to it. And it really, it's a huge problem, but I'm about to drop another bomb. So here we go. So here's the thing. People want to see you operating as a business. Foundations, governments, and even individuals, whether they're small donors, since we like to categorize donors, they're small donors, they're medium donors, they're major donors, they're big whales. I mean, I've heard all the terms. Okay. But here's the reality. They don't actually give you the money because of the mission that you are carrying out, period. They are giving you the money for different reasons. For foundations, a lot of times it's because especially if they're private foundations, it's because there's somebody on their board of directors who has an affinity for that particular thing, and you just happen to come along and write a good enough application, and maybe your CEO or your board chair, a key volunteer or something, knows somebody on that board.
Preach.
And by the way, because the government requires them to give away 5% every year. That's it. It's really that low, but it's really their business motivation for granting you money. Secondly, businesses only actually give you money when they sponsor your things or they write you a grant or something like this. It's not because they believe in your mission. Now, every once in a while, you're going to find a business owner who actually believes in you and your mission and your good work. But most of the time, it's for one reason and one reason only. It is for how much market share can they pick up if they sponsor you.
Mm-hmm.
And individuals, they give you money for all kinds of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest of which is, we're coming up on this season again, is because they're like, oh crud, I need some tax write-offs. That's why so many people write you checks in December.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know most of you are aware of that, so some of you may get offended by my words, but here's the thing.
Welcome to Real Management Talk.
Knock it off. You need to. I know. Well, people need to get realistic about this.
It's true, and that's because it's like you just said. When you're realistic about how the philanthropic community comes to a decision about supporting you, that's when you get real about who you seek support from. Mm-hmm. And that's I think the biggest problem that I have with a lot of our nonprofits who want to work with us or who work with us, or who, they have a very unrealistic expectation of the process. And they forget that it boils down to exactly what you just said. So why would I spend time? I might be a very honorable veteran service organization, for example. I'm nationally known, and there's chapters that I have all throughout the, different states throughout the country. Why wouldn't Valero, for example, or HEB want to support my organization? It's like you just said, it's not about you. It's not personal at all. The reality is that when a organization, especially a for-profit organization, is giving that little 5% that they do, whatever, 5% plus that they give back every year, out of obligation, what they're looking to do is increase their reach. It's not just sort of haphazard or whimsical. It is very much calculated. So what does that mean? That means you need to go find organizations that are specifically interested in supporting organizations like yours. So that means you need to be looking up their funding priorities. If you do not fall within their funding priorities, stop wasting your time.
Yep.
It's just that simple.
It really is that simple. So to sum it up, we're going to say it again. Business as usual is dead, and it's left the station.
It's gone.
It's gone.
See, I'm defending.
That are listening, LJ's chugging along. She left the station. Okay,
business as usual is dead.
Yeah. So, you know what, guys? Thank you so much for joining us in our fishbowl today. We really, really appreciate you and appreciate you listening to us. And, until our next episode, we are getting down to recording some of our last episodes for this year. And then we're going to take some type of hiatus, maybe. You never know when we might jump in online or do something else crazy, but at any rate, and then,
If you want to see us, if you don't want us to have an hiatus, that's your opportunity to reach out and let us know that you love the show and that you want to sponsor an episode. And you can even choose what you want us to talk about. Just reach out, guys, and let us know. Otherwise, it's going to be as according to our very busy schedules when they let up.
Right. Well, and I'll put the shameless plug in here. We'll plug anything that you tell us to plug, as long as it is not, unethical, illegal, or otherwise. If you pay us to plug it, though, we'll plug it, right?
That's right.
So, there's probably some things we're not going to tell you guys that we'll accept all requests, because we reserve the right there may be certain products and stuff that we are not comfortable plugging. So, but, since this is our new business model, since we know the business left the station, and, we, just like the rest of you, are figuring this out one day at a time, folks. But yeah, let us know, and we will talk with you all later. Thanks so much. Bye.
Ciao.
Ooh, oops.